Have you ever felt like there's too many companions in BG3? Have you ever felt like there's an entire kindergarten that is full of children that you need to take care of? Would you rather have four fully developed characters that are on the level of Shadow Heart's interactability, or would you rather have eight companions that are not as fleshed out? Today I'm gonna talk about what I think is one of the problems in RPGs. In BG3 Act 1, you have access to most of your companions. The story unfolds naturally, and you get to meet these people that are thrown into this mayhem involving Illithids, Githyanki, gods, immortals, walking, talking brains, etc. The pacing of the story and the way they are presented to us as players felt very natural and seamless to me. But as the story progressed more and the threads became more and more intertwined, it became a bit hard to keep up with all the quests and tasks. Whenever I would come back to camp, I would obsessively make sure to interact with all of the companions in fear of not missing some special, unique interaction with someone. It started to feel like a chore instead of a gradual, naturally occurring thing. Some of you might want to say that you can tell if someone has something important to say because the game notifies you about that in two ways. First, before you can rest, if someone wants to talk to you before going to bed, you are notified with a message telling you that someone wants to talk to you. And the second way is by showing an exclamation mark above a certain companion's head. But even then, I've personally seen dozens of unique interactions or reactions to what the party did during that day by simply clicking on the companions and talking to them even if they didn't have an exclamation mark. And these reactions varied from a simple comment referencing something new we had found out, like a new piece of information about another companion, or how some new event unfolded regarding the main quests. And it varied all the way to a mini discussion where I would either have to inquire a character about what they think of something specific, or they would be the ones asking me about what I'm going to do in regards to a specific subject. It felt as though sometimes there wasn't enough time in the day to talk to everyone. Not to mention that sometimes it felt a bit overwhelming. I'm not saying that I wanted less dialogue in the game or less talking, but I would have liked it if the pace and delivery of some companions' opinions in regarding to some specific thing would have been a bit more personalized. What if, after you find out about Shadow's Heart's artifact, there was an intermission discussion with Lae'zel, where she asks you to help her to take the artifact, and if you refuse, then she tries to take it by herself? What if, after we find out about Gale's magic or problems, some companions would have a dialogue with Gale about the topic, and they would come to you and ask if they could come and offer Gale whatever magic item they have in their inventory at the moment? I know that in a previous version in early access, companions would talk to each other, and some players complained about that. But again, I feel like that is not a problem of sheer volume, but a problem of pacing. Like I said, I'm not one for less dialogue, and I'm not advocating for less interaction here, but instead for a better pacing, and maybe the game could have achieved that if there weren't so many different characters with so many different permutations. I love what Larian did with BG3. I have over 1,000 hours in the game at this point, but if we're gonna be honest, some of the interactions were a bit awkward sometimes, and other times downright buggy. I can't remember how many times I had Holstein tell me what he thinks about a specific topic that didn't even happen yet, but because of the complexity of the game and because of the permutations, some characters would talk about actual spoilers for the story, and this kept happening even after patch 8, so I'm not referring here to the 1.0 version of the game that was even buggier at launch. And this is not an isolated issue, this has always happened in RPGs. I've talked a bit previously about Pathfinder Kingmaker, and that is also a masterpiece of a game, but it also suffered from the same overload of information as BG3. I remember that at some point, because of the team composition that I had, I neglected two companions, Octavia and Regongar. The dynamic between them is very good and they have an interesting relationship, but at the moment, because I wasn't gonna use them in my party, I didn't complete their companion mission. And they died in the last battle through a canon story event where you couldn't save them if you didn't have enough rapport or reputation with them. It made me feel bad, and it's fine to lose companions if you make mistakes or if you don't invest time into their stories, but the reason I didn't feel like doing their quest anymore was because I was already tired of doing companion quests after I previously did all the other quests for the other ones. And again, the issue isn't the sheer volume of the content, but the pacing. There is a specific chapter where a lot of the companions' quests start to approach the end, and you have to do them all in the same act. And if you finish that act without them having their story completed, you get the quote bad ending for them. Coming back to BG3, some of these topics are still being discussed even today, 2.5 years later after the game's launch, and there's a very good reason for that. For example, people argue that Will's arc is still a bit bland, and that his character needed a bit more work overall, and if you've paid attention to what Larian has said over the course of these years, then you know that Will underwent some changes while early access was still going on. Another hot topic of debate would be Karlach and how her story ends. And the reason for why her story arc is the way it is because she was one of the last, if not the last, addition to the cast of characters. And again, I'm gonna ask you what if there weren't so many characters that needed that much attention to begin with? What if Larian stuck with what they initially intended as the cast and then went on to hammering down every last detail of each character's story arc? Maybe I'm alone on this one, but I'm gonna use some numbers just to make my point a bit clearer. Wouldn't it be better if instead of having 12 companions, for example, we would have 6, but much more fleshed out with more than 2 endings each and maybe more fleshed out romancing scenes for those interested? That would help us as players get much more involved in their lives, right? Instead of arriving at a point towards the end of the game where it almost feels like a checklist. I feel like that would allow for better character growth as well because the volume of the content would be the same, but instead of it being spread across 12 different story threads, it would be much more focused and have much more depth. I know there are people that will say that there's not enough companions and that they want more, but I guess there's a balance of quality versus quantity. There will always be people that will want more, and that is fine. It's normal to want more of the thing that you already enjoy. But is that really worth sacrificing quality? And to be clear, I'm not saying BG3 is a bad game. It's my favorite game ever, right besides The Witcher 3. But I can't be the only one that noticed that towards the end of the game, a lot of the story threads felt chaotic. I referenced earlier Shadowheart. If you ever romanced her, it feels as though she's the one made to be romanced the most. Lae'zel is also awesome, but the way you can keep on having daily checkups with Shadowheart and ask her for her input on what has been going on at the camp lately and her giving you the insight into what she thinks is best felt to me as one of the most natural and most fleshed out companion interactions ever. And you can have super interesting dialogues with her even if you do not romance her. I understand that variety is the spice of life, and having lots of options for different tastes is always good. But if you are a Mintara fan, you can tell me that you feel fully satisfied with the way you can interact with her when comparing Mintara to Shadowheart, or even to Lae'zel. As for the male companions, Astarion, Gale, Will, all of them are great, but why can't I, as a guy, just drink a beer with my boy Gale, or have a fishing contest with Halsin without him trying to get in my pants? As a matter of fact, many of BG3 players voiced their opinions regarding the fact that everyone in camp felt like they were always hit on, or being attacked, or a combination of both if you're Lae'zel. All of these extra activities and interactions would have been a wonderful addition to the game, and obviously, resources are limited, so you can't just have a full blown dating sim inside your RPG all the time. But maybe by reducing the sheer number of characters and permutations in a story, the dev team could focus a lot more on depth and profoundness. But this is just my opinion. What do you think RPGs should focus more in the future?